of course, we're here because we're publicising who we are as a group, and we're using the platform in collaboration with James to talk about our business. But our commitment to this space is very genuine and real. And I want to say thank you to James and to your team, because these types of places and spaces where industry practitioners and leaders in Web3 can come together and just talk about, that was a great panel. That was a great discussion. I learned a bunch of stuff. I'm excited to make those connections, but this is the very type of dialogue that has to happen. And here we are in the center of our capital. I'm from the UK. I long for our country to be leading in this space, and I watched the ship sailing past. But I'm so grateful, and we are very committed to supporting this space moving forward, simply because this conversation needs to be happening here in the heart of our city for the future of what this industry can be. And I really do hope that attention gets picked up and responded to at a more central level. So we're really grateful for that. So my name's Chris. I'm a co-founder of KULA, and really today I wanted to talk about just our process. We about 2 weeks ago finally launched our project after about 4 years of hard graft, pain and struggle, but we're thrilled. And just 2 weeks ago we had our token launch, and it's really exciting because now that milestone's been reached. We can now actually move forward and start to build and start to have some of those collaborative spaces and places where we can start moving forward. So we're really excited about that. But I want to ask the question, have you ever been so confident in something and then ended up expending lots and lots of capital as you realize you didn't have a clue what you're doing to start with? That's pretty much my story and our story in KULA. And I wanted to talk about that from the perspective of really what it's taken for us to build a regulatory compliant token and project over the last 4 years, and kind of be honest about that and reflect about that honestly as a process, because there are for sure others here that are building real world projects utilizing Web3 technology in a space that's really, and it's still only 15 years. It's only 15 years old, right? It's still early, and there's still so much to learn, and there's still so much to grow in as an industry. We've had a very long and painful process. We've been through about 11 different jurisdictions. We spent well over $2 million in figuring out how to get legally compliant, and that process, it's something I want to be honest about, because hopefully that's helpful, and hopefully it keeps creating that space and dialogue for us moving forward. We started with a really, really simple and radical vision. We want to make the uninvestable investable. In places where I work, and in my background in UN work, often the common narrative where communities would be displaced from the land that they lived on as the assets that they lived on or around were exploited by third parties. And after years of watching that process again and again and again, and across different components of the development field, with my colleagues now, we ended up in a conversation of really exploring where and how can smart contracts start to solve for those problems in ways that equity is given to local communities, but locked in smart contracts, so they can really be participants and have a voice in those assets that in some ways are rightfully theirs. We knew from the beginning we were going to take no shortcuts, and at times we've kind of kicked ourselves in that process, but we were always very committed. We're going to do this right. We're going to use the technology that's at our disposal to make sure that we're compliant, we're regulatory in a space that's okay, and we're not stepping over lines in any way, shape or form, to make sure that we're going to not end up in trouble working in the virtual asset space, but also out of a commitment of leveraging the technology that is available to us in a way that is also providing access to local communities in places and spaces around the planet and globe, that when people can access, they're also not going to be stepping outside the lines across these multiple jurisdictions that we're working. So we started 4 years ago, and we had no clue what we didn't know. And within a very short period of time, we ended up spending about $100,000 on one particular jurisdictional process. And we learned really quickly, okay, lesson learned, but that was a big mistake. And that led us into a second and third jurisdiction of trying to find ways that we could make our project regulatorily compliant. We went for about a 9-month process with regulators in Europe. And after that period of time, we got to the point where they were trying to make us something that we weren't. There was a box that we didn't fit into. They had a certain number of boxes and we didn't fit into any of those, and they were pushing us into one. And we realized that that wasn't going to work for us. We then went to several other different jurisdictions who were exploring different options across Europe. From North America, we had phone calls with lawyers in different countries in Europe that would put the phone down on us pretty quickly when they were asking about what we were trying to achieve. We ended up finally then in the Middle East, going through a whole other process, which after about 14 months led us to another set of dead ends, really. And over that process, we just learned a lot. And I'll go through just a few of the lessons learned in a moment before we get to the panel discussion. It just cost us a lot, right? It's cost us a lot of time, a lot of sleepless nights, finance and capital, but also a lot of brain space and learning. How do we make uninvestable projects, people that are in developing communities, able to have access and to really participate in a safe way? We finally crossed the line and we've launched under the regulatory wing of our partner at the moment, and that's really exciting to have got there. But we've learned some pretty solid things. The first lesson was that we have been incredibly naive from the start, but we learned along the way that every time we hit a hurdle and we hit a pain point, it was an opportunity to learn. And that brings me back to places and spaces like this, because over the last year and a half in this room, we've had conversations where we've walked away with key learning or key relationships that's helped us move forward, which is why these spaces are so important. We learned to build our technology from the ground up in a compliant and regulatory compliant way. So we've actually baked in regulatory compliance to the very basics of our technology stack, so that when it's operational, it's serving everybody in the correct way. We also pivoted quickly. I loved what was just shared in this last panel around just that sense of human connectivity and trust, right? Or the authentic voice. We pivoted quickly to a point of realizing that we can't be a decentralized protocol at the extremity, because governments in countries that manage their assets, they require legal entities, they require their tax bills. And so we pivoted to a space where we talk about Web 2.5, where we actually ended up putting our assets into a regulated and protected cell company, and then really pivoted the token to a full governance utility, so that we're actually able to stay within the realms of clear regulatory compliance. The third component moving forward is really understanding as well that governance matters. We've really worked very hard to build a very deep governance over our token process, rather than being completely decentralized and a full democratic model. We've built smart contracts to interoperate with each other so that there can be a level of oversight to how we manage things. Again, just to provide that level of compliance and checks and balances that keep regulators and compliance parameters satisfied. And finally, we've really learned that regulation is such a good thing, right? It's understanding that this isn't something that's dead set against what we've been trying to achieve, actually something that we can embrace to make sure that we're actually addressing core issues and staying within the spaces that we want to stay, such as making sure that we've checked people through KYC, KYB, understanding the travel rule, the various different protocols that we're required to satisfy cybersecurity, data protection and data privacy, and also the consumer protections that are required in the process too. Because at the end of the day, we want to be about building trust. We want to be a trustworthy protocol that's addressing needs and not falling into the space of the industry where there is so much hype, there is so much speculation, which leads to the negative sides and the negative connotations and reputations that are found in the Web3 space. We've worked really hard at the end of the day, fundamentally, to build trust and not just build a token. So as we move forward with that process, it's taken us a significant chunk of time, but it's been worth it every step of the way, because we stand at a point today where, having gone through all these different jurisdictions and spent that, invested those funds and not lost them, we're at a point now where we can stand confident and strong with what we've built, so we can actually address and provide the utility to the need that we've identified and been going after this last few years. We're really excited now. We get to start building. So KULA, whilst we've been doing proof of concept and starting to make investments into communities in Africa, Asia, and different places, now we can actually start to build partnerships and start to build in this next season ahead. And as we move now to the panel discussion, we can talk more about the practicalities of that, and as Emmanuel moderates that discussion.